Good morning, church. I just want to say thank you for tuning in to our midday manna. It's 12:30 and a lot has happened just over the last 24 hours. And I want to encourage you right now with the word of God to hold strong to your faith and to remember that we love and serve a God who is above it all. Let me read to you from 2 Corinthians. This is another one of Paul's great passages. Let me read this. For we do not want you to be unaware, brothers, of the afflictions that we experienced in Asia. For we were so utterly burdened beyond our strength that we despaired of life itself. Let me take a minute to explain this passage. Firstly, Paul is writing for the believers in Corinth not to be unaware of what the circumstances were going on, what things were happening for Paul and his companions. And he said, I write this so you wouldn't be unaware. I think that's so important, that awareness in this day and age is really, really important. We do need to be aware of the social climate that is currently happening. There is a bliss in being unaware, and there's a benefit in the sense that if you're unaware of the crisis and the problems going around us, we will be less anxious. But what Paul is saying is, actually, we need to be aware. Why? Because if we're not aware, we can contribute to the pain and suffering around us. And so that we also cannot empathize with people if we are unaware. And so what Paul is saying here is he's saying, I want you to be aware. And he's also saying that there's been great burden, great suffering, and great loss. And so we have to remember that there's people around us going through rough times. There's people going through hardships. And we shouldn't be unaware of that and think, all rosy thoughts. But that being said, Paul goes on in verse 9. He says, indeed, we felt that we had received the sentence of death. I mean, that sounds horrible, right? He felt like God had given him the death sentence. But the next sentence says, but that is to make us rely not on ourselves, but on God who raises the dead. And he goes on, he delivered us from such a deadly peril, and he will deliver us. On him we have set our hope that he will deliver us again. Now, if you don't get encouraged by that, I don't know what is more encouraging. Because what Paul has done is he's been not shying away from the hardships of life. But what Paul is doing is he's saying, we've experienced hardship, don't be unaware. But he is not content just to stop there. But in fact, Paul is moving and saying, but look at our God. Look at what he has done. He's not pointing to airy-fairy principles, but he is talking about real events. Look at this. That we would not rely on ourselves, but on God who raises the dead. They had experienced the power of God in raising the dead. How so? Well, Lazarus was raised from the dead. Jesus himself was raised from the dead. There is so many accounts of where people are raised from the dead, and Paul is pointing back to the fact that God is powerful, even to raise people from the dead. And then he says, he delivered us from deadly peril. He's now talking about his personal experience that God has come through for them. And so he was shipwrecked. He had hardship. He had a rough life, but he could point back to the occasions where God had delivered him from that. But not only did he rely on that God would save people from the death. Not only was it his personal experience, but then Paul goes on and says, on him we set our hope that he will deliver us again. That's an open-ended term that right now we're experiencing certain things, but in the future we'll also experience certain hardships. And The hope is that Jesus will deliver us today from our problems and tomorrow. And so we can stand comforted in the fact that we have a God who is a deliverer. He is constantly delivering us from our situations and bringing us in to greater places. May this encourage you throughout the rest of your day. May you leave this daily manna, midday manna, with an encouragement that will last into this week.